The Upper Moon Demons are the strongest enemies the Demon Slayers have, except MJ himself. But what if I turned all the Upper Moon Demons into Hashira? You won't be able to guess how the story would change. Starting off with the Upper Moon 6. In their original lives, Gyutaro and Daki, originally called Ume, had a rough childhood to say the least. Gyutaro found his beloved sister burnt to a crisp in a ditch after she stabbed a samurai in the eye. But in this timeline, the samurai ended up being a demon slayer, and instead of preying on them, he took pity on their circumstances, took them in and trained them. As long as the both of them had each other, anything was possible. Together, for the pursuit of a better life, they rose through the ranks to eventually become Hashira. Ume would be the beauty Hashira, who would use her obi and sashes infused with Nichiren blade weapons. At the same time, Gyutaro would be the blood Hashira with Nichiren sickles that become deadlier with the blood of his enemies. Gyutaro wouldn't be conscious about his looks anymore, and despite his reputation of being the scariest looking Hashira, he would gain the love of many due to all his work saving others. Gyutaro would finally get the affection he was looking for his whole life. The siblings would be inseparable in missions, and together they would live down as the legendary Hashira of beauty and blood. Next is Kaigaku. If you didn't know, Kaigaku was one of the children Gyomei took in, and he was the one that let the demon in on the orphanage. After that, he eventually ended up training under Zenitsu's grandpa, Jigoro, becoming a demon slayer. In this timeline, Jigoro managed to knock some sense into him and change his morals into a better person. Knowing Gyomei eventually becomes a Hashira, overwhelmed with guilt and a heart to do better, he went to Gyomei and knelt in front of his house for 10 days and 10 nights for redemption. Forgiven by his devotion, Gyomei decided to take him under his wing, and eventually discovering his potential and talent, Kaigaku succeeded Gyomei as the Stone Hashira. Moving on, it's Gyoko's turn. Formerly known as Managi, we know his parents went out to sea and came back as corpses, to which Managi finds his obsession with corpses and art. But in this timeline, before he could see his parents' bodies, a fisherman picked him up effortlessly. The fisherman tells Managi of his past and shows him his sword. The fisherman was a retired demon slayer. He gives Managi a choice: become a fisherman like his parents or walk the path of a demon slayer. Managi inevitably chooses to be a demon slayer. Under the care of a new human he grows to like, he climbs the ranks and eventually becomes a Hashira. Because of his closeness with the sea, he becomes the water Hashira during his lifetime. One thing that would make him unique is his weapon. Instead of a sword, he uses a Nichiren no Dachi that closely resembles a fishing spear, the same weapon that killed him in his original life. He would also still be fascinated with corpses, but it would be controlled. Managi would go on to become a leading figure in the Demon Slayer Corps when it came to medicine, especially in anatomy. Now this is a tricky one. The other Upper Moon demons have so far been redeemable, but Hantengu has always been a delusional liar. But everyone deserves a chance, even someone as two-faced or more appropriately seven-faced as Hantengu. In the original storyline, Hantengu was a liar, a thief, and a murderer. Well, what happens in our story is that Hantengu was taken in by a demon slayer as a child. He lied to get money out of the man, but the demon slayer, who originally had a tough upbringing himself, empathized with him and decided to nurture him. From here on out, Hantengu would train under him until one day his master dies after fighting an Upper Moon. Because of this, Hantengu would become fueled with rage to avenge his master. He would rise to the rank of Hashira. In fact, he still made use of his trait of lying to effortlessly deceive his enemies. Hantengu would go on to become the Wood Hashira, an inspiration from the blood demon art of his strongest clone when he was a demon, Zohakuten. At the peak of his strength, Hantengu would hunt down and defeat the Upper Moon that killed his master, and as time went on, he would train more and more demon slayers. After this, he vows to find more children like him and tell the true story of how his master saved him. Subscribe if you want to be redeemable like Hantengu. If Hantengu's backstory was bad, you wouldn't believe just how terrible Nakime's was. After killing her husband, she would start murdering people before her biwa performances until one day she mistakenly tried to murder Muzan. So how do we turn this literal serial killer into a Hashira? Well, it all started one night while Nakime and her husband were walking on the streets. One thing led to another, and her husband tried to abuse her again, but he was stopped by a demon slayer who coincidentally happened to be there. That demon slayer would take her with him, and she would wholeheartedly agree. Time moves on, and both of them fall in love. Nakime would remarry to the demon slayer and would watch him train day and night. One day, their home was attacked by a lower moon demon, and her husband died protecting her. She would eventually kill the demon herself using her husband's blade. She followed her husband's footsteps and joined the Demon Slayer Corps, and would go on to develop her own breathing technique, music breathing, inspired by Uzui's sound breathing. Whenever she would go on a mission, she would play a song her husband loved using her biwa. This gave her the nickname the Silent Biwa, as almost no demon in Demon Slayers ever heard her voice, just her music. But the easiest upper moon to turn into a Hashira is Akaza. For Hakuji to be a Hashira, he would have to experience the greatest grief, but not in its original way. We start our story after Hakuji and the love of his life, Koyuki, are announced to be wed. Instead of Hakuji visiting his father's grave alone, this time Koyuki comes with him. This means that when the well of their dojo was poisoned, Hakuji and his wife were safe. Both of them would have the time of their lives and would have their wedding. But Hakuji needs to be a Hashira, so as much as I don't want to, we have to destroy his life. One day, a demon breaks into their dojo and his wife is killed. Much like Iyome, he would pummel the demon until sunrise. He would be put in jail because they thought he was the one who killed his wife, but the head of the Uboyashiki household at that time would save him. He would go on to become the Destruction Hashira. Akaza's breathing technique, destruction breathing, is derived from his knowledge of martial arts, and like his blood demon art in the main timeline, it becomes stronger the more aggressive his opponent is. And just like Hantengu, Doma was born a sociopath. But unlike Hantengu, Doma was born completely emotionless. To turn Doma into a Hashira, it all needs to start with his mother. After his mother would find out that her husband was constantly cheating on her, she realized that the greatest form of revenge is by taking everything away from Doma's father. So, after carefully planning everything out, she would steal all the donations that the followers had given, get Doma, and run away from it all. They would get attacked by a demon during this, but while his mother passed away, he was saved by a young demon slayer. Without anyone left, he follows her, and even without any emotions, he just thought it would be interesting to see what she does. Eventually, he trains to become a demon slayer like her, and he doesn't know why, but he just likes killing demons. He eventually becomes the Ice Hashira in the same era Gyoko and Akaza are in. With his breathing technique, he can decrease the temperature of the surrounding air and freeze the hearts of his opponents in seconds. Since he lacks proper emotions, he's one of the best Hashira in terms of pure offense since he literally shows no fear. There's a likelihood that he and Akaza are the strongest Hashira of their era, and they constantly get into fights because Akaza just hates his guts. And of course, we have Kokoshibo, the strongest upper moon. In this timeline, despite his jealousy, Kokoshibo had never even dreamed of betraying the Demon Slayers and accepted his fate to die young because of his Demon Slayer mark. He would never meet Muzan and would go on to become the first Hashira alongside his brother. They do end up fighting, a stupid fight between brothers, but all of Michikatsu's hatred and jealousy would die down once he finds the proof of their bond, the flute that his brother made for him as a kid. Both of them would continue fighting demons, and since he never wiped out the sun-breathing users with Muzan, the Demon Slayers would continue to flourish. The golden age of the Demon Slayers would go on for so long, and Kokoshibo, along with Yoriichi, will be known as the Pillars, the Sun and Moon Hashira that help the Demon Slayers continue their fight against the demons, eventually removing every single demon from society. So, what do you think? And have you ever wondered how every Upper Moon demon's backstory would rank in a sad tier tournament? Well, see the results here.